Welcome to the Hard Skills Show, where we discuss how to develop the nuanced hard skills, meaning the most challenging soft skills needed to make a real impact through your leadership. One of the greatest challenges to wanting to make a greater impact is that feeling like we don't have enough hours in the day to do all of the things that we want done. And in fact, most leaders I work with feel like their days get so filled up with constant stream of putting out fires, responding to emails, constant interruptions from people calling or coming by with new concerns, and all kinds of administrative paperwork that they can never seem to focus on and do the big vision strategic stuff that they really are excited about, that drove them to want to be in a leadership role in the first place. If that sounds like you, this is your episode. Our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn, is an engineer and executive turned advisory and community builder who will share the mindset shifts, actionable strategies, time management insights, and scalable solutions required to make this happen. This episode applies to both entrepreneurs and organizational leaders within any industry. So it's going to apply to you regardless. And it's perfect for Seasons 5's focus on making a greater impact. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu. I'm a leadership consulting and coaching psychologist, founder of Tower Scope and Tower Scope Leadership Academy, an associate professor, a Psychology Today columnist, and author of Millennials' Guide to Workplace Politics. And I had my own leadership career before transitioning to helping teams and high-achieving women navigate their leadership complexities. So welcome and great to have you on the show, David.
It's great to be here, Mira. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, let me share with all of you a little bit about David first. He is the podcast host of Smashing the Plateau. I was on his podcast and loved our conversation so much, invited him on our podcast. And he's also a community builder behind Smashing the Plateau, same name, an online platform offering resources, accountability, and camaraderie to high-performing professionals who are making the leap from corporate career track to the entrepreneurial business ownership. But I think his advice actually transcends the entrepreneurial journey and really can apply to any executive or senior leader. His weekly advice program has been named by Forbes as a podcast to power up your ultra lean business. And David has also been recognized as an entrepreneur that will change the way you communicate by Inc. magazine. So with all of that in mind, David, the thing that I'm most struck by in your own journey is that you started out as an engineer. And I have found that engineers have this great translatable skill set of identifying the most efficient processes and outcome. And I'm sort of curious how much of your own executive leadership and advisory and coaching services use some of that mindset to help them with time management, with scaling, with strategy and things like that. Tell me more about your background and how you've sort of come to this place and applied that skill set.
You know, Mira, it's a very interesting question. In reality, the portion of my career that I spent practicing engineering was less than 10% of my working time since I finished school. However, I think you are correct that there is something in the training about focusing on processes that ends up being part of who you are. And I left engineering and went into the nonprofit sector very early in my career. And that is where I spent over 2 decades in management and leadership roles, and really both learned how to be a manager and a leader, and also dealt with some of the issues that you talk about on your show with your audience, particularly about how to focus on creating a greater impact, where you need to make sure that your time is used as wisely as possible, so that just as you said in the introduction, you can focus on the strategic work that is really your secret sauce, and try to encourage and find ways for other people to do the rest of the work that that you don't have to do. And it is a real struggle. It's one of the most common issues that we talk about in our community. It's a very common issue that I talk with guests about on my podcast all the time. And you're right, this transcends roles. When you're in a leadership role, whether you're leading a big organization or you're leading a solopreneur business, you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. We have 24 hours in a day and 168 hours in a week. So focusing on what we do best so that we can maximize our impact, maximize our investment of time, and maximize the resulting impact is really critical.
Yeah, yeah. I think you and I, in some ways, had a somewhat similar trajectory in that I probably spent a split second as an actual clinical psychologist. 5 months, no, even less than that to be exact, and quickly went into management and leadership. And people would ask me, because I really didn't spend much time in a traditional psychologist role, they would ask me, like, don't you miss it? Don't you want to go back? And I said, I use these psychologist skills every day, all the time. It's just not with mental health patients. And I think it's the same in some ways for you. You probably use some of that engineering mindset all the time. It's just not in the most traditional ways. And then you've added on top of that this leadership skill set from being a leader for so long and identifying some areas that are challenging. And so I'm curious, you mentioned the ideal situation is if once you're in a leadership role, if you can kind of extract your secret sauce and just focus most of the time there, and then be able to delegate or turn into processes all of the other things. But that this is one of the most challenging things that a lot of people in leadership roles, whether entrepreneurial or within an organization, have challenges with. Why is it such a struggle? What makes it challenging?
Well, there are a few things that make it challenging. One is, as a leader, you're often you often have two areas of focus. One is you see where change needs to happen, and so focusing on trying to make a transformation is one set of leadership skills. And then if you're leading, whether you're leading an organization or a small business, if it is an existing functioning organism, then it needs to operate. And getting something to operate as effectively as possible without making change is very different than trying to make changes. And I see, for example, somebody who's new in a role, who is brought in, particularly when the organization sees that some change is needed. They often have many challenges because they have to learn how things are done. They have to make sure that the trains keep running on time. And they have to focus on, okay, what is it that needs to change so that we can have a greater impact, have greater profitability, whatever the impact is that they're trying to achieve. So they have to do that at the same time. It's a lot of demands on somebody's time and somebody's energy. And trying to sort that all out, particularly when you're new, is really challenging.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because if you're focused, I hadn't thought about it this way, but if you're focused on creating change, while you're also focused on making sure everything is stable and operational, and you have strong infrastructure and so like stability and change don't necessarily make, it doesn't sound like they mix. But I guess I'm curious, do they mix? Can they mix? How do they mix?
Well, that actually kind of leads to the other technique when it comes to managing your time that I think is really important, which is um, there's what you need to be proactive about and what you need to be reactive about. And you spoke about, always putting out fires, for example.
Yeah.
And this is a discussion that we have. We just had it actually a few days ago in a live session in our community. When you start your day, you are likely to be bombarded. If you're in a leadership role, you're likely to be bombarded by a long list of emails in your inbox, messages on whatever tool you use, Slack or some other chat tool. You're likely to be bombarded by all kinds of things that are waiting for you from team members, from clients, and from colleagues. And you most likely have your own agenda of what you need to do proactively, either on your own or to trigger something with the people that you're working with, so that will move the ball forward. And how do you deal with both simultaneously? And the reality is, it's almost impossible to do it simultaneously. I think there's a myth that we should be able to be better at multitasking. And you probably know more about this than I do because of your background, but I don't see how the brain can multitask. And I find whenever I get an interruption, it takes me, especially if I'm working on something that requires concentration, it takes me time to sort of go back to where I was, remember what I was thinking, remember what I was doing. So a tiny interruption has a huge ripple effect. And one of the techniques that I teach people is set up your day so that you focus on what's most important for you to be as effective as possible first. That includes perhaps doing something spiritual, doing something that helps your emotional well-being, do something that helps your physical well-being. Before you look at what kinds of fires are waiting for you, and in addition to, once you have finished doing those things, spend a chunk of time doing the heavy strategic work and what's important for the long term first. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. An hour is great, but if you don't think you can do this for an hour every single day, maybe half an hour. But whatever it is, whatever your long-term impact, and this is where the transformational part comes in, whatever that is, do that first. And then open up your email, look at your messages, start dealing with all the things where you need to be reactive rather than proactive, and divide your time that way. If you're not a morning person, like some people don't do well in the morning, maybe you're an evening person, do that focus time in the evening when you are at your peak performance and peak energy, and deal with all the other stuff later. The other thing you can do is measure the impact of delaying reacting to all these fires. And I'm willing to bet, because I've seen this happen over and over again, if you delay responding to fires by an hour a day, it's probably not going to affect the bottom line of the organization or your business. It's probably not going to affect the impact of what you are trying to achieve very much, if at all. And you will also likely find that spending half an hour to an hour of your peak performance time on what's most important for the long term is going to outweigh the shortcomings of delaying responding to fires by 30 to 60 minutes a day.
These are really, really great. And just to sort of recap and also put a fine point on everything that David just said, there is lots of research behind everything that he said. It's true that multitasking isn't a thing. People say they can multitask, but the effect is degraded attention and longer time to come back to where you were. Absolutely, lots of research on that. And I want to highlight also the doing the most essential, focused, strategic, impactful things up front, and or at your peak performance. And for those folks who I've worked with that also have ADHD, this is critical because some people with ADHD or who are night owls or whatever have different peak times that they perform better than others. And you want to track when that is. Like, take 2 weeks to just track, when am I at my most focused? And those are the times you should be blocking off to focus on the hard focus stuff. And do not wait to be inspired or motivated, because that's sporadic. Make it a practice the way that David described. Just make it a practice, like a daily practice, that instead of waiting to like that inspirational moment, which may or may not come, and then you'll be frustrated. Make it a practice. We'll come back to some of these in just a moment. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn, author and of Smashing the Plateau podcast, and also the community builder of Smashing the Plateau. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, and you can find us on LinkedIn and YouTube and other locations live streaming at talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn, who is the podcast host and community builder of Smashing the Plateau. We went right into some techniques immediately, which I was very, very excited about, especially when it comes to time management. We picked out a few things that are also rooted in evidence in research. And I wanted to pull out just a couple more before we move on, as just like thinking about myself, right, in some of these. I really like, David, how you said, set up the day for how you can be most effective. And then you gave a few examples. And I had never thought, like, when you gave the examples, like I thought, oh, okay, like put my pen here and my pad of paper here and, make sure that I'm sitting right and that kind of thing. But actually you were like thinking about your spiritual practice, or what do you want to eat or exercise, or does your physical state need to sort of like get yourself set up? And I hadn't really realized that I have gotten into the practice of working out every morning. And I've never been a morning person, but that's what my spouse did. And he's very much like a routine person. He's got routines down everywhere, and he's so effective and he's so efficient. And that is really, the reality is that's not me. I like variety. I'm a shiny object person. I like to do something different all the time, but that doesn't set me up for success. And so I started copying him, working out every morning the way he did. And on the days that I don't, like on the weekends when I'm just like, just sliding from my bed into the couch, I'm less productive, even if I want to be productive, because I didn't do the things that would set me up for success in terms of like mind focus, nutritional focus, all of these things. So I just really appreciated that you pulled that out. And then the other practices that I have is like the most arduous things I do with accountability partners. Writing can be arduous for me, even though I love writing. And so on Fridays, people know I meet with a few other writers and we write together for a couple of hours. And that helps me not do other things that are more shiny objects and exciting, but actually like do what I actually want to do to accomplish the harder goals. And these are the kinds of things that I really appreciated that you sort of pulled out that, I think apply to the kind of leaders, especially who are like me, are not like a fan of routine, are not a fan of like doing, certain arduous things, and yet really need the systems in order to be successful. So recapping that, I want to move into, how you got to supporting what you call corporate refugees. First of all, what is that? What's your definition of corporate refugees, and why did you decide to help this particular population as they enter entrepreneurship? And yeah.
Great question, Mira. Yeah, so corporate refugee, my definition is a high achieving professional who has been working in his or her field for generally 20 years or more in an organizational setting. And I use the term corporate very broadly. It could be a large enterprise, public or private. It could be a small business. It could be government, nonprofit. But you're fitting into somebody else's structure in your work. And you've been doing that for a long time. And then you leave either voluntarily or involuntarily, and you decide that that is not where you want to spend your time. That's not your future. You want to do things on your own terms. So you start your own business. And in most cases, what I've seen is people at that stage in their career, when they've built up all this experience and they've have these great skills, they will most commonly stay in the same discipline because that is, it's the easiest, and that is likely to be the best revenue producing opportunity for them as well. They generally really like what they do in terms of their disciplinary focus. They just don't like the kind of the environmental setting. They've gotten tired of it, for whatever reason. We can talk more about that, but they've left and they've gone on, started their own business. Very similar to what you and I have done in our careers. I was an employee for the first 28 years of my career. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 18. And it's, it's kind of setting things up for, on your own terms for how you're going to make a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm curious, what do you see as the commonalities for maybe why they choose to make this shift, and then what they expect and maybe not expect once they make the shift?
Yeah, so some of the commonalities are, imagine that you're in this high achieving position. It may be a high profile position as well. You're part of this team. You have what you're responsible for that you focus on, and then there are team members that take care of all the things that either you're not good at or are not part of your responsibility. So there's this built-in social structure as well, besides the organizational structure. And then you leave that behind, you go out on your own, and particularly if you do this abruptly, which happens quite frequently, you start off with, you go from a place where you had, as we talked about in the earlier part of the show, you're very busy, you have an overflowing inbox, you have an unending to-do list, your calendar is full, and you go out and you start off with 0 clients, empty calendar, empty inbox, no social structure, and in fact, your former colleagues often want to stay away from you because you've left and you, in some ways, are somewhat of a pariah. So one of the commonalities is like fear. Am I going to be able to actually make this work? Am I going to be able to get clients? Because now you have to, not only do you have all this empty time, but you have to get up and market and sell something that you've never sold before, which is yourself. So even if you were in a marketing and sales role for the company that gave you a paycheck, that's a very different feeling than having to generate the paycheck on your own.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm hearing a lot of, I think a lot of people don't realize just how much is set up for their success within an organization in terms of the rhythm, the structure, the available resources. HR is there, IT is there, somebody to fix your computer when something goes wrong. I mean, that's as simple as that, right? And then you go into you start up your business, and none of that structure is available, including your network, right? Like you have to sort of rebuild back up and piecemeal all of these things around you, but it's got to be, kind of intentional the way that you put these things together. And when you were talking, it was actually reminding me of when I used to work with veterans who retired from a full career, like 20 to 30 years in the military, where everything was set up for their success and hyper-structured environment. And then they leave and none of that is there. And they don't know what to do with themselves because somebody else created the structure for them. And so one of the most immediate interventions is help them create a social rhythm calendar. That's what we called it, a social rhythm calendar. So like, what are you going to do every single day at different points of the day? Put it in the calendar, create the structure that you have lost. And so it doesn't just help them feel like they're back in kind of a meaningful, fulfilling life, but it actually affects your mental health when you don't have that structure, right? It affects your mental health when you don't have the social rhythms and the routine. So it's not just about like putting together what's necessary for your company, but also for yourself, for your own sort of mental health and how you feel about having made this transition. And especially, like you mentioned, if you're experiencing fear, like, what did I just do? Or will I be successful? All of these things help you get back into a rhythm that helps you feel really good, right?
Yeah,
so
very true, very true. And I remember, Mira, when I started my business, my network, they were not people who were entrepreneurs. They were people in organizations. They were my colleagues, my friends, my former colleagues from past jobs. And one of the most common questions I heard from them was, David, are you crazy? What are you going to do for health insurance? Why don't you just get a job?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably coming from their own fears, right? Their own fears of, gosh, I don't know that I could do that. I'm curious, we're reaching an ad break. I'm curious what your own mindset was. And more generally, like, what are some mindset shifts that people need to make when we come back? So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn, lead of Smashing the Plateau. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back with our guests in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn of Smashing the Plateau. So, David, before we went to the ad break, you started mentioning some of the very common and understandable fears that either we or other people have of our decision to move into entrepreneurial life. And some of those are like, will I be successful? But some of them are coming from other people, probably people who either love us or are anxious about their own, potential future if they were to do the same thing. And they're saying things like, what about healthcare? What about a stable income? What are you going to do? And that feeds into that fear. So what are some of the mindset shifts that you had to make early on when you transitioned? And what do you see of the people that you support in your own community about the mindset shifts that they need to sort of like develop for themselves as well?
Yeah. So Mira, first of all, fear is always going to be there, but it doesn't mean that you need to dwell in it or that you need to let it overtake you. Just recognize that it's there, and you will work through the issues around fear and move forward. Another thing to keep in mind is I believe very strongly that a scarcity mindset is very destructive. The reason that there are 8 billion people living in the world today, or however many there are, is because we've learned how to become social and how to collaborate, right? Without collaboration, there wouldn't be enough food for everybody to eat worldwide. So keep in mind, there's enough business for everybody. And this applies whether you're a leader in an organization or you're an entrepreneur running your own small business. Have an abundant mindset and find ways to collaborate. I learned this early on. I was less than a year into my solo consulting business when I left the nonprofit sector. And a friend of mine who was also a solopreneur in a different discipline invited me to attend a business networking event. And I'd never gone to one before. So I was kind of new to this thing. And what I saw was there was a structured methodology for people to interact and to try to help generate business leads for one another. And it was a very uplifting, abundant mindset framework. I ended up joining. And just the fact that I did that, it gave me a time and place to be with other people who had an abundant mindset, all focusing on the same thing, which is how can we help one another do better in our individual businesses. So
I love that. Yeah.
abundance, I think, is one of the most critical things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is resonating a lot. I think that is a very common fear, that scarcity mindset. And I also found a few others on your website that I'm curious about. You say, don't assume success will happen overnight. Don't be afraid to try it someone else's way. And don't worry the joy out of things. I love these. Tell me more about these.
Yeah. The whole thing about, you talked before about the shiny object syndrome. We're very attracted to quick fixes for problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that whenever I have interviewed somebody who has achieved a massive breakthrough, a breakthrough is what other people notice after you have taken hundreds or thousands of tiny steps and pivots. Think about the way that a baby learns to walk. There's a lot of falling down before they even figure out how to stand up and balance. And then there's still a lot of falling down before they're able to take steps without holding on. Everything in life and business is iterative. You try a lot of things that don't work. One of the big differences I see between being an employee and an entrepreneur is, as an employee, if you are wrong more than 10% of the time, you're probably going to hear about it in a negative way. And as an entrepreneur, if you're right more than 10% of the time, you're probably doing really well. So keep in mind that success in business can take a long time. And just, we have a system that we use called the SMASH system, which has 5 steps. And one of the steps is just focusing on iteration. What is it that you need to do week in and week out, and kind of day to day, where you can make very incremental progress every single day? Because if you can make, let's say you could make a 1% improvement in something each week, imagine what that translates to in a year, right? So don't focus on quick fixes. They're generally quite fleeting. Focus on the long term and focus on these small steps, and then figure out, okay, what do I need to do to support myself so I can keep working at them for such a long time and have the perseverance to do it. Like you talked about your writing group, right? That's a tool to help you move forward incrementally in your writing, right? So that you do better every single week when you meet with your colleagues. There are a lot of ways you can make these kinds of incremental steps. So so success does not happen overnight. And avoid the shiny objects.
Yeah. I recently, I have sort of shifted my mindset around some of this myself, because for those of us who are high performers, high achievers, we don't often sit and appreciate all of the accomplishments that we've already achieved and how much it took to get there. We sort of take them for granted. We're like, yeah. What's next? What's my next goal? And that's what we're hyper-focused on. And that's what I get very irritable about. Like the next goal that I'm not able to achieve, or I'm having a setback, or there's some kind of stuck point around it, and it's annoying me, and I get real frustrated. And recently, I've done a couple of iterations of, one piece of my my program, and it isn't working the way that I want. And I was getting like real frustrated every single time. And I'm like, you know what? This is not helpful. This is an iterative process, and I need to lean into it like a learning mindset, curious, interested, and lots of fail forward over and over, like fail fast. Like you mentioned, this is an iterative process. And each time that I try it a new way, I do learn something. And I just have to sort of keep reminding myself, that I'm learning something and it's getting better and better. I'm just not patient enough. That's all. And so, and I keep, reminding myself and many others who are starting their business, that being patiently impatient or impatiently patient, whichever way you want to take a look at it, is one of the sort of ways to sit with the slower progress, but still keep pushing towards the goal as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the second point you mentioned, don't be afraid to try it someone else's way. We're all unique, and I think there's this expectation that when we come up with a way of doing something, it's going to be brand new. Nobody has ever thought about doing it this way before. And the reality is that is not true. We model what we do based on what we have seen others do that we think will help us be successful, and we tweak it a little bit. Or maybe we combine something that relates to time management from one person, something that relates to good strategic thinking from somebody else, something that relates to profitability from somebody else, and we combine them in a way that both serves us and serves our audience really well. So modeling, I think, is a great tool. For example, I have founded an online community for corporate refugees. I'm not the first one to create an online community. A lot of the tools that I've tried to deploy in our community, I've learned by watching other community builders. So just, when you're doing something that that serves your audience, look at ways you can adapt what other people have done and embrace them.
Yeah. We all want to be special or put something special out there and be appreciated or recognized for that. But even the way that we each piece things together is unique. It's a unique perspective when you decide to piece what you learn here and what you learn there and from that person. And that is meaningful. So I agree with you completely.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. And the last point, celebrating the joy, you touched on how important it is to celebrate your successes. So yes, celebrate your successes. Don't dwell on all the things that you haven't done yet. Be mindful of what you've done successfully, where you've made an impact, how people appreciate what you've done for them. And also keep in mind that as a knowledge worker, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, look for ways to make some changes so that you do enjoy it. So particularly for corporate refugees, they often get to a place in their career where the environment makes it really challenging for them to enjoy the work in their discipline. And so they are looking for a different environment in which to serve their audience.
Yeah, I'm hearing mindset around adaptability, flexibility, pivoting, which is important for every leader, regardless of whether you are an entrepreneur or working within a larger organization for others. It helps you sort of stay up to date, stay fresh, and it allows you to continue, embracing the challenges instead of getting frustrated about them, which I think is really important right now when everything's kind of feeling volatile and there's lots of changes and it's easy to just sort of get stuck. But that adaptable mindset helps a lot. David, we're reaching another ad break. When we come back, I'd like to hear a little bit more about some ways that we can scale ourselves, in terms of your framework, and maybe a little bit more about this SMASH system, the 5 steps that you mentioned. So you're listening to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn of Smashing the Plateau, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, David Shriner-Cahn. David, you started telling us about the SMASH system, and the first one of the first steps was sort of leaning into this iteration incremental process, right? A learning mindset and the incremental changes. Tell me more about the system and the 5 steps.
Sure. And actually, the iteration is not the first step, but I'll run through the steps really quickly. We covered some of the points that are in the system, and not necessarily in the order in which we recommend that people go through them. And then we can talk about how you can actually use the system to have a greater impact with the limited amount of time you have available. So it starts with stirring up your dreams. Like you need to understand what's most important to you and set goals. And when I define goals as being specific, so you know when you're working toward them, but broad enough so that you're never finished doing the work. So they're really audacious. Some people might call it a vision statement, but it's essentially what will guide you for the rest of your life in everything that you do, both work and your personal life. And then you kind of map out your ideal future, what it looks like. And from that, you can create specific objectives. And we're talking right now in a business context. Then you can also identify business objectives that you can work on that are measurable and are much more short term, so that you know when you've achieved each one. And then I like to create a 90-day plan. It's long enough so that you can work on something significant, but it's not so far into the future that it seems daunting and unachievable. And in particular, focusing on one primary business objective where you're really trying to move the needle forward every 90 days is great. And then the iteration starts as you work on how you're going to stick with it. What is your implementation process? And coming up with methodology to be able to do this week in and week out, have a weekly plan, and most importantly, as part of this process, it's critical to have thinking partners that will help keep you on track, not only so that you do what you say you're going to do, but also they can give you feedback. Just the simple act of telling somebody else what you're working on helps you think about it, hear it differently, and perhaps reframe it even before they comment. But then their feedback can be invaluable, particularly if they do it in a non-judgmental way where they're using leading questions to kind of probe deeper and make sure that you are able to deal with the challenges of what you didn't expect. Because when we create a plan, it's based on what we know that we know and what we know that we don't know. It's what we don't know that we don't know that causes the biggest challenges. And other people who are your thinking partners can help you see some things that you didn't know that will help you move forward faster and accelerate the process. So that collaboration is really critical. So that's sort of the overview of the system. And how do you do more of it with less time? We talked about some of these techniques, focusing on what you do best, where stay in your zone of genius as much as possible. And there are 3 techniques for doing as much of that as possible and not doing the other stuff, which is to defer. We talked about how to put off either for a short period of time, or you can decide as things come your way, I don't have to deal with this today. I can schedule dealing with this next week or next month. It's not that critical. So don't be afraid to defer something. And and obviously delegate where you can. You don't have to be the one to do everything, and you shouldn't be the one to do everything, particularly things that you are not the best at. Those should be delegated, and things you don't like doing, you should delegate. There are a lot of ways to delegate today that are not super costly. So start finding ways to delegate. Anything that is easily repeatable should be delegated. And the last thing, which is probably the most important one, is learn to say no, right? The more you focus on the one thing that you're trying to achieve and the one impact you're trying to make, the better. For example, I serve corporate refugees. It was a long process to get to this point. I've had a long career. I wasn't always serving corporate refugees, but focusing on this one particular audience with their set of problems means I can do a better job serving them. And yes, we could use our framework for lots of other people, but that's not what we market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think saying no is one of those things that are really, really challenging, especially to high achievers, high performers, because technically we do have the capacity to take it on, but at what risk or detriment? Like what is the downside? What is the con of taking more on? Well, you're spreading yourself very thin across more things and not able to get better and better at the things that you want to get better and better at, because you're putting less and less time and attention to these things, right? So these are all fantastic. Thinking partners, just a quick question. Is that how you use your community, partly as thinking partners, available thinking partners?
Very much so. And we do it with a combination of live sessions, a private interactive online platform, and we encourage people to connect one-on-one as well.
Yeah, I think that's really just, well, I'm a big fan, obviously, because I also have a community for that very purpose. We call it accountability partners, but being able to have other people who help you think outside of yourself, see blind spots, ask different questions than you would ever ask yourself, is the value in having that kind of community. So what is, out of all of the things that we've talked about, what is one thing that people can take away from today that you really want them to consider?
I would say focus on how you can do more with less. And
yeah,
we've talked a lot about a lot of different techniques. Just pick one that resonates with you to start with. Don't try to tackle all of it at once.
Great advice. Now, if people want to work more with you, where would they find you?
They can go to smashingtheplateau.com. And if you want to learn more about the SMASH system, there is a free download that outlines the system that you can get by going to smashingtheplateau.com/checklist.
Excellent. Those of you who are watching with us live or later, the recording, I pulled it up right now so that you can see smashingtheplateau.com and /. You can actually just put checklist, or you could also
will
put
redirect to this
Yeah.
URL.
Yeah. And so what do they get here when they go?
They'll get an outline of the system. So it's a high level. It'll give you some instructions on how you can start thinking about using this framework in your business, in your work, and in your life. And again, these techniques apply no matter what it is you're trying to achieve, whether it is greater success in your own business, greater success in your job if you're part of a bigger organization. And you can use it to create greater success in the non-working parts of your life as well.
Excellent. I agree with you that these are skills that apply well beyond folks who are entrepreneurs, even beyond folks who are in leadership positions, 100%. So out of all of the things that we talked about today, audience, what did you take away? And more importantly, what is one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from David? Share it with us on LinkedIn. You can look up David Shriner-Cahn or Smashing the Plateau or Mira Brancu and at talkradio.nyc and share it with us so we could cheer you on. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all over the place. In addition to being a live show, we are also on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon podcasts. Please help us increase our visibility, reach, and impact by leaving a review. The stuff we talk about on the show is also part of our research-based strategic leadership pathway roadmap that we teach in our TowerScope Leadership Academy and other programs, which are private coaching and learning communities for socially conscious leaders in disrupted learning and innovation industries looking to make a greater impact. You can check us out at gotowerscope.com. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, your host of the Hard Skills Show. And thank you for joining us today with our guest, David Shriner-Cahn. Have a great rest of your day wherever you're tuning in from. Bye, everybody.